Today we want to talk about using Lightroom to convert our color images into grayscale or black and white images. Doing it in Lightroom or a Camera Raw, very straightforward, very similar, and it's all self-contained in Lightroom. So you're not having to go any other application. There is a way to do it in Photoshop, and we may do that down the line, but for now, let's stick with Lightroom. So let's take a look at how this whole process works. When we're going in and converting our images from color to grayscale, we do want to start out with the best adjusted color image we can. What I want to show here first is what not to do. So when we are over here in our adjustments panel and we're going ahead and making our basic adjustment, the one thing you really don't want to do when you're converting into a grayscale image is to just remove the saturation. Now when you remove the saturation from an image, it just removes the color information but leaves the tonal values behind. So if it happens that the tonal values are similar, we no longer have really much separation between these. If you could visualize that these were actually, let's say, flowers, against a light background or overlapping. You've got a red flower overlap in a field of green. If I take the saturation out, not a lot of separation anymore. So the idea here is not to remove saturation as a means to create a grayscale image. So enough of that lecture. Let's actually see how the whole process works using actual photographs. So what I want to do is, let's go over here. And we have an image that's already been adjusted. Some of this I'm just going to cut to the chase because it's a little easier, and we'll definitely make this more of a concise video. So we have an image here that's adjusted. Now we have kind of a red, yellow, green thing going on here with a blue background. So a lot of the colors, dominant colors that we would use, are kind of spoken for. So how do we make this into a black and white image? Well, you have a couple of options. We have this black and white option here, and all that does is it removes the color information, and what it will do is go down here to fine-tune that stuff. Okay, so I'll do this again with another image, so don't worry if that didn't gel just yet. So actually, let me retrace my steps here. In my color editing mode, you want to have the image pristine, you want to have it ideal, and then we're going to go ahead and pick on black and white. Okay, now when I scroll down to black and white here, open it up, get it more in the foreground, and it's defaulting to these options. And so the idea here is that when you're making your conversion to black and white, you're going to affect the colors a little differently by moving these sliders. And so what I want to do is reset that. So all I did was just double click black and white mix, and that reset it back to zeros. I'm sorry, I shift double clicked this. So if I click on auto and I hold down the shift key and double click this little title here, it resets everything back to 0. I can click on auto as a starting point and then move my sliders accordingly. Now, as I was saying earlier, you definitely want to find or keep separation between your elements. So with color, it's a little easier. Green and red, it's obvious. Well, if the values are similar, then it gets to be a little bit more problematic. In this situation, our background's blue and this is yellow, but the values are very similar. And so what we want to make sure is that we create some type of separation. Now, I'm not saying make it so dense like this, but if it works and it looks good, then you can, because of some texture in the background, it gets exaggerated in this situation. Now I can play with the yellows, make them lighter or darker. Now they look like all green peppers or all red peppers. So the idea with the conversion is to play with these different sliders. Really, it is play. You'll get good at picking which ones work better, We know that's green, we know that's red, and we know that's yellow in the original. So if I play with the red, and then on the green, now there's definitely not going to be just, it's not always just green or red. Sometimes you'll have, notice here on the aqua, it may not be obvious on the actual pepper, but there is some aqua in that shot. Here on the blue, now that's the background, predominantly blue. And then here, purples. Oh, the background has purple in it too, so kind of a blue and purple thing. Magenta, yeah, a little bit of magenta on the red pepper. Maybe that's too bright. Now, when you're doing it, you want to make sure that you don't create these little funky areas. You want it to still look natural, still be able to read what it is. Maybe I'm going to knock that background down a little bit more. Cool. You know. So here we've gone in and we've made our conversion. And if you need to fine tune things, you can go back up to your adjustments here, your basic adjustments, and play with the shadows. Open them up or darken them. You know, the highlights, whites, so on. You know, to really make the image kind of pop. Bring the blacks down a little bit, play with the contrast. So now we have, you know, a completely different image, this time in grayscale. If I go to my split screen separation here, you know, basically this is what we've got. You know, we can't get over there. I don't know why. Oh, how's that? We're way zoomed in. And you can see there's, on the original image here, there's a little bit of bleed from the background. And that's probably why we're getting some like magenta and whatnot in this area, because you've got a little purple mixing with the red and so on. So here's our grayscale image. Now you'll actually need to print this and save it off as a JPEG. So let's go ahead and save this off first. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, Export, and go to, you can say Burn or whatever. These are the presets here. And if you continually save to a certain size, you know, like for the stuff we're doing for school, I'm going to use this as a starting point. I can choose the folder or specify it later, choose folder later. And if you're, like it says here, useful for presets. So we will set that later. We don't need it to add it to the catalog, which is the Lightroom catalog. Renaming, I like to keep the original file number, and then you can give it whatever, you know, name you want. Okay? And so here I'm saying 143, and then it will keep the original file number. That's handy because if you ever need to come back to that original, you'll know exactly which one it is. JPEG here, I'm going to go with the maximum quality setting, sRGB. Image size, I'm going to say the long edge to 2000 pixels. I know we've been doing 1000 pixels, but 2000 just seems to be a little bit bigger, so I can actually see more detail when I'm looking at your images. And that's it. So let's make this a preset. Over on the left-hand side here, it says Add. Click on that, and all I can have to do is say photo 143. There we go. Simple. Click Create. Now, anytime I come in, I can specify this. You know, or if you have any other presets for different sizes and different formats, you can do that here. Okay, so I'm going to just click on Export because I have that one image selected. And it's asking me where to put it, because remember we said let's save it for preset. So here I'm just going to say, I'm going to save it to my output folder on my desktop and click Open, and boom. It should be saving. Pull that down. It should have saved. And let's go to the output folder. There it is. Since I did not give it a name, all it says is 143. So you'll have to go in here and say grayscale, or actually for this one, you can see I already have some samples in there. I'm going to call it grayscale 2. So that's my grayscale 2 image. Okay, that'll be one of the images you hand in. Now, what you can do with this is you have your grayscale image, and simply you can go back and click on color, and you can actually do file, export, Command-Shift-E on the Mac. We have this, and let's see, original photo, no, you know what? Yeah, let's keep it like that. Cool. And then what else? We want to click export. We have our Photo 143 assignments tab here. Again, we're going to pick the output folder. All right, now there it is. That's the color one. So 2. All right, so we have this one and this one. You'll hand in both for the assignment because I'd like to see what you started with in color and then what you ended up with in grayscale. Okay, now instead of having it be an option of just turning black and white on or off, these are the settings we just had. If I go back to the black and white setting here, they don't go away. They're still part of the image. It could be, if you do this often enough, it could be tedious that you're actually going to go from color, save it as black and white, and so on. So what we can do is actually create what's called a virtual copy. And so you have the one master file, and then you're going to make a logical or virtual copy from that, and you're going, it will treat it as a completely separate image. So it kind of gives you the option of making changes to that one main image on these virtual copies. Sometimes you want to experiment. Sometimes you want to have multiple iterations of the same file. And instead of going in and trying to turn this on and off or make the adjustments here and remembering what you did previously, let's make a virtual copy. So I'm going to right click or control click on the image, and it says create virtual copy. Okay, now what it does is, let me bring this, I'm not sure I can bring it up a little higher. You'll see 1 of 2 and 2 of 2. That's called a stack. So when you create the virtual copies, they may be stacked together because basically they're the same image, just different kind of variations on that same image. So here, if I click on this, on the number here, it says 1 of 2, 2 of 2. If I unclick it, notice that thumbnail went away and it just says 2 on here. If I had 3 or 4 or 5 images in this stack, it would say 3, 4, or 5. Here it's just 2. When I click on the number here, it expands the stack, and it allows me to go into number 2 here and jump to the side, but that's cool. So here I would be working, okay, get all finicky on me. And so I'd be editing number 1 and image 2. Okay, so you can go back in and now turn black and white on, or you make your black and white adjustments from that color image. Now I have my color image here and my black and white image side by side. So that way I don't have to have, go back and forth and turn things on and off. Now if I wanted to, let's make a virtual copy of this. Okay. Now if I wanted to make different adjustments to my black and white stuff, let's say I wanted to really darken that, make the green go lighter if I can, the aquas, or if I wanted to make everything the same value. Let's do it that way. Cool. Now there's nothing else you need to do. You make those adjustments, and here's the other one we just did. Here's the original one. So here. Now notice it says 3 of 3. If I click that again, that stack collapses, and now it's kind of taking up less space visually on your in your thumbnails. So here, if I click on that, it expands out, and I can see my derivative images. So it's a really flexible way to go in and make iterations of that same image, and that way you can kind of just experiment and try things out. So again, you want to start out with the best adjusted color image you can, and from there you're going to create a virtual copy and then apply your black and white toning adjustments to the image. And let me expand the stack here. Expand the black and white toning images or adjustments to the image and play with the sliders. See what they do. Again, we're trying to create areas of separation and interest. So you don't want it to be all gray on gray or light on light on light. You want it to be light to dark to light to dark to light. So your eye will have a place to travel around the image. Okay? So hopefully that worked. Hopefully it was helpful. If you have any questions about any of this, please let me know, and happy editing.